All right, I think it's time to begin. Good morning, everyone. Today's a very exciting day. We have already been looking forward to our first series with the expert attorneys at STBB. Today we are doing FICA training, so thank you so much for all joining. I'm sure you will find a ton of value from the session. Before I start, just a few house rules. If we can ask that everybody keeps their microphones muted for the entire meeting, will obviously just be a lot nicer for everyone. The presentation slides will not be made available as this is part of intellectual property, but you can find any of the brochures and handouts on the STBB website if you need. And then please post any comments, questions, queries in the chats, and the STBB team will attend to these questions at the end of the session. We obviously have limited time, so we'll try and get to all the queries, but if there's any complicated queries, we will send, the STBB team will send through an email address that you can contact them on there. So I will join you at the end of the session. I am going to hand over to Maryna from STBB. She holds a BA, LLB, LLM degrees and is director at the Cape Town branch of STBB. So you are in very good hands today. She's an admitted attorney, notary public, conveyancer, and insolvency practitioner with many years of experience in the fields of property law, conveyancing, and the laws relating to corporate compliance, especially in respect of the FICA and PAPIA laws. So we will be doing another series where we focus on the PAPI Act. So watch out for that invitation. And lastly, she's editor and co-writer for the ABC of Conveyancing and Delport South African Property Law and Practice. So thank you, Maryna. We are very excited for the session and handing over to you.
Thank you so much, Candice, and welcome to everybody here. I recognize a few names. Jennifer, yours are at the top. Lovely to see you again. I was fascinated that Candice said we are looking forward to another session on FICA, because I think there's a lot of people out there, if I mention the word FICA, they doubt your sanity. And if you say you're excited about it, they're very sure about your non-sanity at the time. But what we want to do today, and what we were briefed to do, is to give you the essence of FICA from a property practitioner, from a state agent's point of view. In other words, apart from the huge piece of legislation, and it traverses loads of pages, what is it essentially that the FICA or the FIC Act requires of us to have in respect of each client that we deal with in our hands? So I'm really going to boil it down practically. And as Candice mentioned, we will have a Q&A session afterwards. I'm going to try and limit my good news about FICA to 40 minutes. Then my fantastic colleague Nicholas will join us to address some of the questions you raised in the chat group, those that he didn't answer there already. And those that we can't answer in the chat, you're very, very welcome to join us, to message me or anyone at STBB for assistance regarding those. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Zainab, can we see my screen? No.
Not yet.
Okay, let's just give it a sec. Okay, sorry about that. The first few slides are not so nice because it's just a picture of myself and saying what I've done, but Candice has already said that, so that's great. Okay, here we go. I've just closed it and reopened. So here we go. So welcome to FICA on a practical point of view. That's me, but you will see me now enough in the talk. So let's start with first things first. There's general rules about what you must do when you're busy onboarding a client or when you've onboarding a client, and we'll deal with that as continuing from step 2 onwards. But there's one or two things that you may not even start with from a FIC point of view. And these are that the FIC say you may not have as a client at all a person who's on the terrorist sanctions list. That's an international list kept by the UN organizations, which says who are the known and convicted terrorists and terrorist organizations. So if your client is on that list, or the organization he or she represents is on that list, you are not at all allowed to enter into a transaction with that person. He can't be your seller or your buyer or your landlord or your tenant. You're not allowed to even engage with him. How are you going to know that your client is on that list? You have to do a physical search on the FIC's website, where they've got these lists, and it provides for you to enter a name and an ID and certain details, those that you have. You enter those and it tells you, yes, the client is there, or no, the client is not there. It's possible that you get false alarms. So maybe if it's a general name like John Smith, there might be several John Smiths on that list, but it might not be the John Smith who is your client. So you will have to check that and make sure your client is not the one on that list. If your client is a hit on that list, you need to tell the client and your management in your agency that, so sorry, we can't continue with this transaction, and you'll jump on the phone or on the website to the FIC and tell them, listen, this person tried to engage us for services. It's not something that I've seen in practice at all, fortunately, but it's a risk that you have to be aware of. And the FIC requires of you, if they ever come and do an audit in your offices, they want to see that printout that you did against that TFS checklist. I'm sure Candace is going to touch on this later on with regards to the service that the virtual agent offers. But if you don't have an extraneous, a third party doing that for you, you have to check each and every of your clients against that list. Do a screen print it out for your file, or keep it electronically. You absolutely no go to touch base with those peoples. The other persons that you may not at all enter into a transaction with is someone who's anonymous or whose identity you cannot establish. Now, in property transactions, it's unlikely that you will come across that, because mostly we need the names and surnames for the closing of agreements, for deeds office purposes. So usually that's not a problem that arises in our industry. But if you cannot really establish who someone is, you're not allowed to enter into that transaction. Okay, so those two out the way. Once you've now established a relationship with a client and deals are about to start happening, what are the requirements that the FIC puts on your shoulders and wants you to do? And just before I touch on that, it's important that we distinguish known terrorists that you will find on that terrorist financing list, anonymous persons. Apart from them, there's no one that you may not enter into a transaction with. In other words, the people who are referred to as pips and peps, who are politically exposed people, politically influential people, those are people in high positions. They pose a certain risk, but they're not people that you may not enter into transactions with. So distinguish that from the list that I've mentioned first. And we will look at who these people are later on in the show in the presentation, but it's important just to keep your mind that those are separate descriptions in the Act. The other thing that is necessary to distinguish: a person on the TFS list or someone who's anonymous or suspicious, you may not enter into a transaction there. That's different from forming a suspicion about a client that you want to report to the FIC. So again, just keep those things separate. I will touch on pips and peps and suspicious and unusual transactions a little bit later on, so that you can see where they fit in. Okay, so we've done our first step. We know and who we may not do business with. If I say do business with, what do I mean? What the Act says, it makes a differentiation. It says you may not enter into a single transaction with a person before you've FICA'd him, and you may also not establish a business relationship with someone before you FICA'd him. Now, single transactions typically are sale transactions where it's once-off sales for a buyer and a seller. Can also be a landlord-tenant, once-off situation. Business relationship is something that is ongoing, that goes on over a year, or for example, you've got a landlord who is a repeat client. In other words, over the past 5 years, he's asked you on a yearly or 2-yearly basis to continue to find him new tenants for his entities. That's a business relationship. In the Act makes a differentiation between the two, but from a practical point of view for estate agents, it's difficult to have one process for the one and one different process for the other one. So generally what one does is you treat the FICA compliance with the two of them fairly similarly, except for one thing that I'll mention now, but the treatment of them are fairly, well, are generally the same, except for if it is an ongoing business relationship. Think of a situation of a landlord that you've had on your books for quite a while. Your service to him is great. So he comes back to you and says, listen, this lease agreement has now terminated. Please find me a new one. And over the years, every time you're the one who's dealing with that landlord. That's a business relationship. And what the Act says with regard to a business relationship, it says that you don't have to, every time that landlord instructs you again to find a new tenant, you don't have to re-FICA him every time. But what you must do, you must in your RMCP, your risk management and compliance program for your state agency, you must say that for my agency, for my business relationship clients, for example, my landlords, I am going to perform ongoing due diligence, which is a type of re-FICA, every 36 months. That time period isn't prescribed in the Act, and you can decide that yourself as an estate agency, but 24 months, 36 months is generally reasonable. And that means they refer to that as ongoing due diligence, and that means that at that 24 or 36 month period, you will either do a full re-FICA of that landlord, or you will contact him and say, listen, this is what I have on file of you. Are your circumstances still the same? Yes or no? And you adapt your records accordingly. If you find at that moment things doesn't make sense to you, his circumstances changed, but he is not indicating it to you, you can either investigate further or you can report that as suspicious. But that's where the ongoing due diligence and the re-FICAing comes in. Okay, so we said my first step was to find out if the guy is on the list or if he's unknown. I cannot identify the client, then I can't enter into the transaction. Then I said, okay, but now I want to do business with this person. We said the Act draws a distinction between single transactions and business relationships, but generally we kind of treat them as the same because it's just much easier for practical purposes. I know that if I've got a client that's on my books for quite a while, I will re-FICA him at a certain stage. Okay. Now what? You've got that in your head. Now what does the Act say you must do? The Act says, in essence, that you must just find out who your client is. And then you must verify that information. Who your client is, they want you to find out a little bit more than just his name and ID, because you want to verify that if he gives you a document, it fits in with a bigger picture. So you will have to get an ID or a passport, and you will have to get proof of residence, and you may then require to have a SARS tax number. You may ask in addition for banking details and the like, because all of that will verify that he says he is so-and-so and that he's established at a certain known address. And that, in essence, almost is your second step in the process completed. You have to establish who the client is, and you have to verify that information. How do you verify it? You get supporting documents. You get the copy of the ID, you get residence details, You get bank statements if you want that. You get a SARS tax number if you want that, because it's all confirmation of this entity, of this person. Okay. But life is never easy, you know. So if your client is not a natural person, because natural person sounds easy, I can see them, I can touch them, I can even be angry with them, and they can give me documents and I can see the face and I can verify it against the print of an ID. It's easy. If your client is an entity, it really is way more difficult, because the Act says you must establish the identity of the entity and verify that identity. How do I do that? I've got Pick n Pay Limited as my client, so I establish the identity by getting its SIP-C or records from where they're on the JSE. But with a company, you get the formal registration documents of that entity, and that serves to identify the entity. How do you support that? You get supporting documents maybe from the auditor to say, yes, the entity is still in business, it's not insolvent and the like, and you support that. So you establish the identity of the entity, and you get supporting documents. You must, in addition, says the Act, identify the person representing the entity. So if, let's not use Pick n Pay because that's too large a company, but if I own a small restaurant, and I'm buying a property, and I'm your client, you're now going to get the company details in which I registered the restaurant, and then you're going to say, listen, who's going to represent the restaurant? And I tell you, it's going to be me. There's 5 directors in this company that manages the restaurant, but I'll be representing the restaurant. You need then to identify me, but that's all you need of me. So you need my ID and you need the resolution authorizing me to act on behalf of the company. And the third thing you need in respect of entities, you must then go a step further and say, listen, who is the beneficial owner of this entity? By beneficial owner, they mean who's the living human being. They call it a warm body. Who's the warm body that ultimately controls this company? So if in my example, we've got this restaurant and we all have equal shares, 20% shareholding in the company, then we manage, we've got the beneficial ownership of the company, and you will have to do a personal FICA on each of the 5 shareholders. Sometimes it's complex because the company construct is such that you cannot easily find out who the beneficial owner is. And let's look at these examples.
Apologies, Maryna. You are muted.
Sorry, since when did I mute myself accidentally? From this screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So if the client, the restaurant business, is company A, and I represent company A, and I approach you for your services, then you're going to ask me, listen, I'm going to FICA company A, so I want the registration documents. I want to know where's the resolution that company A appointed you, Maryna, to represent the company. And then thirdly, I want to know who's the beneficial owner of company A. And I tell you then, oh, okay, that's easy. Company B owns 75% shares in company A. And you say to me, that's interesting, but that's not adequate because company B might be the beneficial owner of company A, but it's not a warm body. And that's not adequate for the FIC. The FIC wants to know then who is the warm body behind company B. So you ask me, listen, give me the details of the ownership, the beneficial ownership of company B. And I will then come to you and say, oh, that's my best friend, Helen. She actually owns company B. And then you will have to do a full person FICA on Helen. The The idea behind it makes loads of sense because it's the natural person, it's a physical human being who actually ultimately makes decisions. If I hide behind a company, it's very easy for me to do things and hide it from what I'm actually doing, because I say company A is doing this, company B is doing this, company C is doing that. So that's why the FICA Act says, listen, they cannot put a company in jail. They cannot prosecute the company per se. They need to know who's the person doing the thinking for the company, who's the person saying that this company is now going to do that. And that's indicated usually by majority shareholding or by having voting rights on the board and the like. You will see from the example on the right-hand side from the screen, these can get very, very complicated. And what we do, even in our offices, if you get a difficult construct like that, and your client is somewhere in the middle there, a company, speak to your FICA officer in your agency, phone your conveyancer and say, listen, help me out here. This is the construct that I have. How do we go about establishing the identity of the entity as well as that of the beneficial owner? But pick up a phone. It really otherwise gets very, very tricky. Same with trusts. The Act says if your client, seller, buyer, landlord, tenant is a trust, you need to do a full FICA on the founder, on each trustee, on each named beneficiary. If any one of these parties isn't a natural, warm body breathing person, then you have to do that same exercise as I explained earlier to find out if a trustee is a company or a beneficiary is an entity, who's the natural person behind that entity. Similarly with a partnership. Any partner in a partnership is an entity. You have to go find out the identity of the entity and also who's the controlling person of that entity in respect of each and every partner. So all of these are really, really tricky. It's not simple stuff, and it's not wrong to pick up a phone and say to someone, listen, find this tricky, help me out. We do it in our offices quite a lot. We sit together, we try and unravel these things when they are tricky. So don't feel overwhelmed. It's natural to feel overwhelmed. What I said just now about you have to find out who's the beneficial owner. You have to find out who's the this. How do you do that? What the practice is that once you onboard the client, you will generally, be it a seller, purchaser, landlord, tenant, you will say, listen, here's the agreement. Here is our FICA questionnaire. Please complete it and please give us the supporting documents that our questionnaire asks for. Sometimes the questionnaires are part of the agreement that you provide. Sometimes it's a separate document, but your way of finding out the details is usually by engaging with a client, asking him to give you a questionnaire, asking him for supplementary documentation, and then tackle it from there. Okay. Your next step is to assess your risk. So what we've done by now is you've checked your client, you see he's not a terrorist, he's not unknown, so you may enter into the transaction. Then you engage with the client, and when you get to the stage of signing any formal agreement, be it a mandate, be it the sale agreement, be it the lease agreement, you give the client, seller or purchaser, landlord or tenant, you give him your questionnaire and you say, please complete this and please give me the supporting documents. You're now happy, client is happy, the agreement is taking place, and you've got a stack of documents and proving and supporting documents. And programs like there's service providers out there that really helps you tremendously to collect the supporting documents. I know that Candice will explain to you how virtual agent can help in this regard too. But now your most important, or one of the very important steps in the process occurs now. And no one can help you with that because you have to apply your mind as agent who dealt with the clients, an agent who's viewing the documents. That is the law. It's not a thumbs up, but the law says. And they say you must assess the potential risk of the transaction. it's subjective. So you look at the facts and you make a call that, listen, everything here is hunky-dory, or in my experience of real estate transactions, this really is slightly fishy. If I think of a wild example, I can perhaps have a purchaser who's buying a house. He says that he's paying the purchase price, his source of funds for the transaction is an inheritance, and he says he'll pay the inheritance to me in cash, and it's an amount of 2.5 million rand. And I've got all this information of my client on file, and now I'm at this risk assessment process, and I think to myself, this is a bit weird, because if someone gets an inheritance, especially in that amount, it's paid by the executor in the state via an EFT to that client, and that client will EFT it to me. Why is he paying his purchase price in cash then? Small things like that you will pick up and you will say, I find that suspicious. What does that mean? Suspicious, unusual transactions, it's a subjective opinion I form. In other words, you don't have to really go and investigate further. You can Google a bit and ask him, listen, how did that happen? But you may say the act, continue with the transaction, but make an unusual or suspicious transaction or activity report to the FIC, because you find in your subjective opinion, this is awkward. Make the report and continue with the transaction. Usually in agencies, they provide you with a little questionnaire, an internal questionnaire that says, listen, are there suspicions? Why is your suspicion raised? Where does the client come from? Is it from a country that is on the grey list that requires increased sanction or not? Is the client far away? Is it a client who never viewed the property or the like? Loads of little questions like that to help you do your internal risk assessment. That is an internal thing. Your client never knows what your assessment of him is. It's internal. And the Act says, work then with low, medium, high risk. If your client is low risk, you're happy with the documents that you have. If it's a medium or a high risk client, you just need to monitor and scrutinize every step of the process a little bit more, and be careful that it might be necessary for you to report the transaction to the FIC. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to stop. You don't have to run to the FBI or some similar organization. You just apply more scrutiny, and if you're unhappy, report to the FIC. My advice to you in this regard is definitely err on the side of caution. Don't wait for the FIC to come and do an inspection at your agency and tell you, listen, gosh, you saw all of this. You saw that he paid cash. He says it's from a inheritance. Why didn't it trigger anything in your mind? Don't wait on them to come inspect. Rather do the report if you, in your subjective opinion, think this doesn't work for me. I think this is awkward. Okay. So I just want to recap where we were. We said firstly that we are making sure my client is not on the terrorist list, and I make sure that I can identify him. He's not an unidentifiable person. Then I can enter into the transaction. I enter into the transaction with him, then I have to FICA him. How do I FICA him? Usually we send a questionnaire, we get some details on that questionnaire, ID, where he stays, sometimes banking details, occupation, employment, and stuff like that, so that I get a picture of who this client is. Then I also ask my client send supporting documents. I don't physically ask him. The questionnaire that I sent will have questions saying, please provide the following supporting documents. All of that comes to you as an agent, and at that moment, you must do a risk assessment, and you check the detail that you have, and you subjectively say, no risk here, or you say, listen, I find it risky, I'll monitor this transaction more, or I find it weird, I'm going to rather report it. Okay, and then once you're at that moment, you've basically done your FICA. Your transaction will then go on maybe to the deeds office, or you will manage the lease, but you've done your FICA on this file. With a proviso that Your reporting obligation is an additional step in the process that may or may not become a requirement. There's two different reporting requirements. It means when you must make a report to the FIC. The first one is if 50,000 Rand physical cash, you want to feel the rands, are paid into your account at a bank, or you know that the client is paying cash to a party in this transaction, then you have to report it to the FIC. It's a trigger report. In otherwise, the fact of 50,000 Rand cash changing hands, you have to report it. 50,000 Rand cash doesn't necessarily mean the transaction is suspicious, but it's a report you have to make. It's a trigger report. It can be suspicious, of course, if you say the client writes on his questionnaire, he's a teacher, he's paying the purchase price from his salary, he's going to get a bond for 80% of the purchase price, but 20% he's paying in cash. That would generally be suspicious unless he can indicate you why he's got so much cash lying around. But otherwise, that cash transaction can be suspicious. But as a general rule, cash transactions are just that. You make a report. Your other reporting obligation arises when and if you find that something is suspicious or unusual, whether in the activity or the transaction, and then you just have to make a report to the FIC as soon as you become aware of that fact. It doesn't stop your transaction at all. The FIC says, make the report and you are entitled to continue with the transaction. They will investigate it in the background and they might prosecute within a year or 2 years or 3 years if necessary, but you are entitled to continue with the transaction. If they want you to stop, they will let you know within 48 hours. But that's unlikely. I haven't seen that happen. What I have seen happening is that the FIC comes back to you and asks for more information on a matter, but they don't stop the transaction. That's due to the way that they investigate stuff, and it's quite fine, but they want to receive those details from you. Okay, so firstly, make sure my client's not a terrorist and that is known. Then I work with him, I send him a questionnaire, I receive the questionnaire, I get the supporting documents. If it's an entity, I've got more work to do because I FIC the entity and I FICA the beneficial owner. Then I've got all the information and I do my risk assessment. And during all of this, there's reporting obligations. At any moment when something is suspicious, I report it, or if it's a cash threshold report, I have to report that to the FIC. And that wraps up your practical FICA compliance. I've got one last slide that I want to share with you that deals with these PIPs and PEPs and funny names. There's definitions you get in the Act, but PIPs is a prominent influential person. PEPs are politically exposed persons. D, domestic. F, foreign. What the Act says in respect of those people, if you have one of them that's a client of yours, I get Paul Mashatile walking into the office here. He's a la-di-da, high up person in the government of South Africa. I'm happy to receive you. And we know usually our politicians are loaded, so they've got big transactions. You're happy to receive the transaction. There's nothing wrong with that. But the Act says because of their exposed positions, there's always risk if you deal with them. So when such a person is your client, you need to get approval from your agency's senior management to enter into a transaction with this person. And you have to, because it's a higher risk, to scrutinize the details of this transaction more than you would otherwise. And that's it. You don't have to show him the door or be scared. Just scrutinize the transaction more and get your management's approval. One thing that I want to ask you. So Paul Mashatile walks in here, but I don't recognize him because I've never seen him. How do I know that he's important? Or I don't know the name Paul Mashatile means nothing to me. So he writes it on the agreement and it doesn't ring a bell. How do we solve this problem? Because your PIPs and your PEPs are people in high positions in government or persons who's got contracts with government that exceeds several million rands. So those are la-di-da people, but you won't know all their names. You won't know if someone walks into the office that he's a municipal manager or a financial manager of a government organization. So how do you figure it out? What does the Act says? So the Act says it's fine if you, in that questionnaire that you send, ask the question of the client, are you a PIP or a DPEP or a FPEP? And the client then says yes or no, and you take it from there. How's the client going to know what is a PIP, what is a PEP? You will, that's why it's a clever thing to attach to that questionnaire the definitions that comes from the FICA Act that says a PIP is a PEP is a person who's who's a minister, who's a department head, who's a CEO of a so-and-so. It gives a list. So your client, when he completes that questionnaire, and when he gets to the question, are you a PIP or a PEP? He looks on the definition that you attach and see, oh, yes, I am, or no, I'm not. And he can complete that. If he lies to you, that's his problem. You won't necessarily pick that up. But you've got proof on your file that you inquired about that, and he said yes or he said no. So that's where they fit in. Fear-mongering in FICA law and in POPI law and compliance is rife. Don't listen to what people generally say to you out there. Phone an attorney or your compliance officer within your office and say, listen, I've heard this is a requirement. I've heard that's a requirement. Must we do it? Must we not do it? But be careful of being concerned with falling on bandwagons and just believing, all the fear-mongering out there. Okay, I think Nick and I will do questions now. I really hope that assisted you. It's very, very hard to go through a complex or a demanding process like that. But yeah, we try to get the basics out there. Nick.
Good morning. Well done. Thank you.
Welcome.
It's a lot of information.
Can say that again.
Yes, absolutely. We've got a few questions, just a few, about 5, maybe 6. The first question that was asked by an anonymous person was, how or what about foreign nationals? And I think what is meant is non-residents. How do you FICA a non-resident?
Nick, do you want to take that? Shall I continue?
You can go for it.
Okay, but interrupt me at any time. A foreign national is just another natural person that you have to FICA. So you give him your standard questionnaire. You say, who are you? Please give me a copy of your passport. Are you a resident here or not? Give me proof of address. What do you do for a living? You just want to find out who this person is. There's nothing wrong with him or her coming from elsewhere. Where I would put an alert is that in terms of the legislation, there's certain countries which is on a grey list that the international community has put on a grey list. Why? Because their internal FICA compliance processes aren't really strict enough. I mean, South Africa is one of the countries on the grey list. We get in Gibraltar is there. Nick, you must help me here. Congo is there. And certain
Dubai,
Dubai is there. Yeah. So if you get a client from that country, welcome him. There's nothing wrong with him, but be aware that because his residence or the funds are coming from a grey listed country, you have to just apply more scrutiny.
Okay, so just sort of raises a little bit more concern if it's coming from that list of countries.
Well, I see, Anton, the grey list is online. If you go on the FIX website, you'll find it there. And the grey list is obviously updated from time to time, as is the terrorist list of known terrorists. But you can find it there. Or otherwise, just send us a mail and I'll forward it to you.
We have a second question, and it's, I believe the question reads, with who lies the FICA clearance, the estate agent or the attorney? Maybe with who lies the FICA responsibility?
Okay. It's a brilliant question, and please don't ever forget the answer, and don't let anyone ever tell you different. The point is, you as estate agencies are accountable institutions. So the full FICA compliance obligation rests on you. Ourselves as attorneys are also accountable institutions. The full responsibility lies on us. We are not allowed to put the responsibility on someone else's shoulder at all. You have to do a full FICA yourself. The responsibility lies with you. And you must remember something small. The initial steps where you collect information, here and there they're sharing. You might ask the attorney, the copy I have of the ID isn't great. Please send me the copy that you got when the client saw you in a conveyancing transaction. But once you've got the documents and you go to that next phase where you risk assess this transaction, that you cannot share with the attorney. The attorney can't share his risk assessment with you because it has to be individual. And that makes sense because what a seller that you've been dealing with for yonks in marketing this property, the knowledge you gain of him is very, very different from the knowledge we gain of that same person when it comes to sign documents in our offices. So we'll do a risk assessment, you do a risk assessment. So it's separate responsibilities.
So almost it's like there's several guards, at the gate, sort of protecting the act and the requirements in terms of the act.
Yeah, I like that, guards at the gate.
Yeah. There's another question: does every client have to be checked on the TF list?
Sorry, yes. Even your grandmother in principle, although you can make a file note to say, I didn't check my grandmother, but you might find your mother-in-law there, So, but yes, the point is the FIC says you need to check everyone. If you decide not to check someone, make a note on your client file that I decided not to check because it's a person known to me, my grandmother or so-and-so. But otherwise, your default is check. I've seen reports where the FIC has done inspections, where the note they made, they said to the agent, there was a one-man show agent, on file so-and-so, I didn't see that report. On file so-and-so, the report wasn't there. So they listed each and every file in that agency where the FIC check was, the TFS check wasn't done. So I really mean what I say there.
Yes. And then maybe the last question, which I think is quite interesting. When reporting, does FIC protect your identity?
Nick, that's yours.
As far as I'm aware, they do. It's completely anonymous. And that's sort of the entire purpose of the reporting to FIC, is that you aren't going to be, it's not going to come back to you. And it's also something maybe to note is that you are not required or obliged to inform your client that you've reported them. In fact, you must not inform them that you've reported them. You, in your opinion, have formulated an assessment and an opinion, reported it to FIC based on your subjective opinion. They will then, within 48 hours, get back to you of whether or not, with the information you've provided, whether or not it actually is a suspicious or fraudulent or a transaction that requires further investigation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
By the way, Nick mentioned now, you're supposed to keep it private. So you can't go home, at a Friday evening, Brian, say, you won't believe what a crook I had with me. And we reported him because this and this and this. It's absolutely private. You report it to your internal FICA officer and you say, listen, this is what we have. We need to report. But otherwise it stays, within your team.
I think, Maryna, thank you. We're keeping very much on time, and I think that was the purpose of today. I don't want to cut or take anybody else's time for their busy days. Candice, thank you for having us, and can we hand over to you for your section of the...
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nick. Thank you so much, Maryna. That was extremely valuable. Just seeing some of the comments coming through that you explained it so beautifully. And I think just listening myself, you really, really explained it extremely well. So thank you. I'm going to take 5 minutes of your time. I think you're going to all be very excited about the latest feature that the virtual agent has launched. It is our FICA and fraud feature. So I'm going to run you through the process, but we have really streamlined the process of FICAing your client and made it as quick and easy as possible. So let me quickly demo it to you. Can you see my screen? All right, so our FICA and fraud feature. For those that have got access to the virtual agent, I think majority of you are clients. If you're on our prepaid option, part of your access fee, you get full access to the CRM. So you are able to purchase FICA and fraud credits, and you'll be able to do the whole FICA and fraud check. If you're on one of our contract options, the lower contract options do not include the CRM, so you won't have access to that. So look at upgrading, and then you will have access to the FICA and fraud feature. All right, so when you're on the CRM, you are able to WhatsApp or SMS your client. This is just a little bit of an example. It will then send a specific link from your CRM to your client via WhatsApp or SMS. You can see it over here. The client will get it. It's called Online FICA Application, and it will have your estate agency details over there. The client will then get, they'll get diverted to a login page, which would look like this. And once successful, it's going to open up a brochure. So your brochure, you'll have your company logo, all your information, so your profile picture, your contact information, etc. And then it will put your name here. So for example, Candice invites you to our FICA portal. They'll then click. It's then going to automatically pull through all the information that we have on the system into a little bit of a checkbox over here. It will look exactly like this. The client then needs to go through their information, make sure everything is correct as per their ID book. So check their ID number, check their email address, check their actual address that it's all correct. They are able to edit it. And once they're done, they'll click on next. From there, they need to upload or take a picture or a selfie of the relevant documents required. So when it comes to an ID document, they are able to take a selfie. This will match back to the Home Affairs database and check that the picture does match on what the Home Affairs has on record. Or they can upload a picture of the ID document and then proof of address. So either upload proof of address, or they can just take a photo of it if that's easier for them. Once done, they would click next. It's then going to bring up your profile, your company logo, all your information again, and thank them for using the FICA portal, and it will let them know that their results will be sent to you shortly. You are then going to receive a FICA report on that client. It's going to give you all the FICA information. You can see, so all the information you did have on them. If their residential address changed, they would have updated it. Any info over here. And right at the bottom, there are two things that it's going to give you. So it's going to give you their risk score. So whether it's low, medium, or high. And it's also going to let you know that the TFC check has been done. So that whole terrorist list that Maryna was talking about, that gray list, that has all been done on the back end. You now don't have to go to the FIC website and go and check if your client is on that list. We do all of that on the back end, and we will give you a result over there. And then your report is done. You will get it. Your client has been FICA'd, and it's as literally as quick and easy as that. Obviously, if you're dealing with a company or a trust, or it starts to get a little bit more complicated, then I suggest phone the experts at STBB and they'll be able to help you. But if you're dealing with an individual and you want to quickly do you want to quickly FICA them, quickly use TVA, and it will happen in a matter of minutes. So just to show you some of our pricing, we have tried to bring our pricing as low as possible, but you can purchase credits. There's no expiry date on their credits. One report is one credit. Obviously, the more credits you purchase, the lower the price gets. So R8.50 per credit. And you can use these credits for both FICA and fraud. And like I mentioned, there's no expiry. If it takes you a year, 2 years, however long to use them, they will always remain on your profile. For business owners or principals, you are also able to purchase FICA credits in bulk if you would like. You can allocate them to your agents, or you can just keep them on your admin login, and your admin assistant can FICA all the clients if you'd like. We've obviously got a support system. Here's some of our contact details for those that aren't our clients, but our team can help you through the process. If you need any assistance, if you want us to show you how to purchase the credits, and if you're not on a package that doesn't include our CRM, then just give us a call and we can run you through a whole bunch of options. And that's it from me. I just want to thank everybody at STBB, the whole team, Maryna, Nicholas, thank you so much. It's always an honor working with you guys, and we thoroughly enjoy our time with you. So thank you. And I'm sure everybody on the session agrees.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Chat soon.